Avoidant psychology. You unintentionally touch their heart, and they can't stop thinking of you. Avoidant psychology. You unintentionally touch their heart, and they can't stop thinking of you. It was not a strategy. That is the first thing worth establishing, because it is the thing that makes this particular experience so disorienting for both of you. You are not trying to reach them. We're not deploying a carefully calibrated version of yourself designed to bypass the defense. We're not operating from a framework of what avoidants respond to and what they don't. You were simply doing something, being somewhere, existing in your own experience with the kind of unself-conscious genuineness that arrives when the performance is stopped, when there is no audience in mind, no impression being managed, no version of yourself being presented for effect. And something in that moment, something specific, something that belonged entirely to the ordinary texture of who you actually are, reached them in a place their system was not covering, not because you aimed for it, because you weren't aiming at all. And the avoidant, whose nervous system has been running its assessment protocol continuously, scanning every incoming signal for evidence of what is being required, what the cost of continued engagement will be, whether the person in front of them is safe or threatening in the specific way that intimacy threatens, encountered something it had no prepared response to, someone who was not performing for them, and fell. Why unintentional is the only kind that works. The avoidance defense system is specifically configured to intercept intentional reaching, not because the avoidant is cynical or because they distrust people generally, but because the defense system, built from early experience, learned to read the specific quality of someone who wants something from them, the slight lean of someone who is hoping for a particular response, the warmth that carries, underneath it, the implicit question of reciprocation, the interest that is, at some level, organized around producing a specific effect. These signals are not always obvious. They are not always consciously sent, but they are present in the micro-quality of attention, in the slight directionality of engagement, in the specific texture of someone who is, even lovingly, even genuinely, even with the best intentions, performing. And the defense system reads them, processes them as the early evidence of future cost, and begins, quietly and automatically, the familiar protocol of managed distance. But the unintentional quality, the moment when you were simply in your own experience, unaware of being observed, unconcerned with effect, carries none of those signals. There is no lean, no implicit question, no directionality toward them. You were there, fully, genuinely, completely occupied with the thing itself, the thought you were having, the emotion you were feeling, the moment you were in, and they happened to witness it. And witnessing someone who is genuinely not performing for them is, for the avoidant, one of the rarest and most disarming experiences available. The defense system, scanning for the signals it was built to intercept, finds nothing to intercept. And in the gap left by the absence of threat, something moves. What? The moment actually looked like it was probably small, not a grand revelation or a moment of obvious emotional significance, not something that announced itself as the moment that would stay with them, more likely something ordinary, the kind of moment that would not make anyone's highlight reel of significant experiences. Maybe you laughed at something without editing the laugh, without the slight self-monitoring that social situations usually install, the awareness of how you sound, whether the laugh is too loud or too uninhibited or too revealing of genuine delight. You laughed because something was actually funny, and the laugh arrived complete and unmanaged. Maybe you talked about something you cared about, not carefully, not in the measured way of someone presenting an interest to a new person whose opinion matters, with the specific, slightly excessive, entirely genuine quality of someone who has forgotten to be moderate about something they actually love, where the caring was visible in the talking, where the investment in the thing was present, without any investment in how the investment was being received. Maybe you were quiet in a way that was actually quiet, not the performed quiet of someone giving space or creating mystery. Genuine quiet, The specific quality of a person who is comfortable enough in their own presence that silence does not need to be filled or managed, who is simply there, in the room, occupied with their own interior without needing to signal that occupation to anyone. Maybe you said something honest that was slightly inconvenient, that did not defer to the social atmosphere. That was true to what you actually thought, without first calculating whether the truth would be well received, not unkindly, just accurately. The specific quality of someone whose first loyalty is to what is real rather than to what is comfortable. Any of these, or something else entirely that carried the same essential quality. The quality of someone who is genuinely present in their own experience without orienting that experience toward the avoidance response. That is the moment, small, ordinary, entirely yours, and it is the moment they cannot stop returning to. What happens in them when it lands? The landing is not always immediate. Sometimes the moment passes without visible effect. The avoidant continues the conversation, continues the interaction, continues the ordinary surface of whatever was happening. Nothing changes externally, but something changes internally. Something that does not announce itself in real time, but that begins below the level of conscious processing to constitute a different kind of data point than the avoidant usually collects about people. Most data points the avoidant collects are about cost, about what continued engagement will require, about the specific ways this person's presence is beginning to generate the familiar signal of impending demand. This data point is different. It is not about cost, it is about quality. The specific, irreducible, cannot be manufactured quality of someone who is genuinely real, who exists in their own right, whose presence does not reference itself to the avoidance response. The avoidance system, which is built to assess cost, does not have a well-developed protocol for processing quality of this kind. It does not fit the cost-benefit framework that governs most of the system's operations. It is not a threat. It is not a demand. It is simply a person, being themselves, in a way that is genuine enough to be remarkable. And remarkable things get stored differently than ordinary things. The moment gets stored whole, not processed through the management protocol that usually filters experience into something more manageable, stored as it was, specific, unedited, carrying the full quality of the genuine thing that it was, and it surfaces in the unguarded moments, in the early mornings and the late evenings and the specific unpredictable instances when the management protocol has temporarily relaxed its vigilance. It surfaces complete with the full quality of the original moment, and the avoidant, encountering it in memory with the same specificity it had in real time, is moved by it again. Not analytically, not with conscious reflection on what the moment meant or what it indicates about you, simply moved. The same involuntary, unmanaged, cannot be intercepted quality of the original moment arriving again through the memory of it. And the thinking continues, not as a decision, as the natural consequence of a memory that refuses to be filed. The specific qualities that tend to produce this, not every moment of genuine presence produces this effect. The avoidant has encountered genuine people before, has been in the company of people who were real rather than performed, has not, as a result, necessarily fallen into the specific, persistent, cannot stop thinking about it quality of what is being described here. What produces this is not simply genuineness. It is genuineness combined with something else. The specific combination of qualities that the avoidance system has not previously encountered together in the same person. The first quality is selfhood that does not need them, not indifference. The avoidant has encountered indifference. Indifference is recognizable and produces its own specific response. That is not this. Genuine selfhood, the specific quality of someone who has a fully inhabited interior life that exists independently of the avoidance participation, who finds their own experience interesting, who has opinions and desires and ways of being in the world that are clearly, visibly their own rather than calibrated to context. This quality produces in the avoidant the specific relief that has been described throughout this conversation. The relief of someone whose presence does not carry the implicit cost of requiring the avoidant to be the center, whose existence does not lean toward them, who is simply there, themselves, in the room. The second quality is depth that is not displayed. The avoidant has encountered people who are deep in the performed sense, who signal depth through the careful selection of what they reveal, who manage the impression of complexity, whose inner life is presented rather than simply present. Real depth is different. It is visible not in what is deliberately shown, but in what cannot be helped, in the way genuine caring leaks through ordinary expression, in the specific quality of someone who thinks about things seriously without needing to be seen thinking about things seriously, in the texture of a person who has a real interior rather than a performed one. This quality reaches the avoidant in a place that performed depth never reaches, because it is not aimed at them. It is simply there, and things that are simply there, rather than being presented, have a specific quality of realness that bypasses the assessment protocol entirely. The third quality is warmth without demand. Warmth is not rare. The avoidant has encountered many warm people. Warmth in itself does not produce the specific, lasting, cannot stop thinking about it effect. Warmth without demand is different. The specific quality of someone whose care is real and whose care does not arrive with the implicit question of whether it will be reciprocated. Who is generous without the specific tension of someone who is tracking the generosity? Who gives without keeping score, and whose not keeping score is genuine rather than performed? This quality is rare in the specific way that unconditional things are always rare, and encountering it in the moment when you are simply being yourself, simply warm in the way that is natural to you, without any awareness of the warmth being observed, produces in the avoidance system something that has no established protocol: gratitude, unmixed with the usual anxiety about what the gratitude obligates, simply the experience of having been treated well by someone who expected nothing in return for the treatment. That experience is stored carefully, completely, and returned to. The thinking that will not stop the not stopping is the part that most confuses the avoidant, because the avoidant understands themselves, in most circumstances, as someone who can manage their own interior, who has developed the specific capacity over decades to redirect attention away from things that produce the alarm, to suppress, manage, contain, file. The thinking about you does not respond to these tools in the usual way. It resurfaces. After being redirected, it resurfaces. After being managed, it resurfaces. After being filed and dealt with, it surfaces again. Complete, specific, carrying the full quality of the moment that produced it, as though the filing did not take. Because it didn't. The moment was stored whole rather than processed, and whole things cannot be filed the way processed things can be filed. They remain intact, available for retrieval, not diminishing with time in the way that processed memories diminish. The avoidant returns to the moment, not because they decided to return to it, because the return is automatic, involuntary, the specific reflex of a mind that has stored something whole and finds itself drawn back to the wholeness of it. This quality of involuntary return is significant. The avoidant knows the difference between thinking about someone because the thinking has been chosen, and thinking about someone because the thinking will not stop being generated regardless of the choice. The first is manageable. The second is evidence. Evidence that something is present that the management protocol cannot contain, that a person has gotten through in a way that the usual distance cannot undo, that the moment, the small, ordinary, unperformed moment of you being genuinely yourself, has taken up residence somewhere the management tools do not reach. The avoidant lives with that evidence, does not always know what to do with it, does not always convert it into action, but lives with it in the background of daily functioning, in the involuntary returns, in a specific and persistent quality of a thought that will not be finished. What the thinking produces in their daily life. The not stopping thinking produces specific effects in the avoidance daily experience that are worth describing honestly. It produces unfavorable comparisons that arrive without invitation. New people, encountered in the ordinary course of a continuing life, are assessed against the standard of the moment, against the specific quality of genuine presence that the moment contained, and the assessment is frequently unfavorable, not because new people are lacking in objective worth, because the specific quality that produced the thinking is not commonly present, is not replicated by general human engagement, is particular to you in a way that the avoidant did not fully understand before the moment made it undeniable. It produces a restlessness in familiar activities, things that were previously satisfying, the self-contained pleasures of the independent life, the specific satisfaction of the managed, uncompromised routine, carry a slight flatness they did not previously carry. Not because the activities have changed, because the interior that is engaging with the activities has been expanded by the encounter with your genuine presence and is not successfully contracted back to its previous dimensions. It produces the specific recurring quality of half-finished sentences in the avoidance interior. Thoughts that begin, "I wonder if she," and stop before completing, because completing them would require acknowledging what the thought is actually doing, which is reaching toward you, without authorization from the system that is supposed to be managing the reaching. The half-finished sentences accumulate, the unfavorable comparisons accumulate, the restlessness accumulates. Not dramatically, in the quiet, daily, one moment at a time way, that things accumulate when they have nowhere to go. Why? They haven't told you. If the thinking will not stop, if the moment has taken up permanent residence in their interior, if the daily experience carries the specific texture of someone who has been genuinely reached, why haven't they said anything? The question seems simple. The answer is not. The first reason is exposure, telling you that you touched them, that a specific, unintentional moment of you being yourself has been living in their interior, returning involuntarily, refusing to be filed, requires the most acute form of vulnerability available to the avoidant. It requires admitting that they were reached, that the defense system failed, that someone got through, not through force, not through strategy, but simply through being real in a way that the system was built to prevent. Admitting this to you is admitting it to themselves in a new way, out loud, without the protection of the interior, where it can be acknowledged and then managed back down. Saying it out loud removes the manageability, makes it real in a way that cannot be quietly contained. The second reason is uncertainty about what the telling produces. If they tell you, if they say this specific, vulnerable, against every instinct thing of you have been in my thinking, and I cannot make you stop, what comes next? What does that admission require? What does it open? What becomes expected of them in the aftermath of the exposure? The avoidant does not know, and not knowing what comes after the vulnerability is, for the system, as threatening as the vulnerability itself, because the system needs to calculate cost, and the cost of this specific admission is incalculable in advance. The third reason is the fear of what the telling reveals about the larger pattern, because acknowledging that you touched their heart, that the unintentional, genuine moment of your presence produced a lasting interior effect, is also, unavoidably, acknowledging that the distance they have created or maintained is a response to being touched rather than a judgment about the insufficient quality of what was between you. It acknowledges the pattern, and the pattern, once acknowledged aloud, is harder to continue running as though it is something other than what it is. What you do not need to do, you do not need to recreate the moment. This is worth saying directly, because the natural response to understanding what produced the effect, the unintentional, unperformed, genuine presence of you being yourself, is to try to reproduce it, to be more genuinely yourself, to be more unself-consciously present, to give the avoidant more opportunities to witness the quality that reached them. But the attempt to reproduce it is itself a performance, and performance is precisely what the original moment was not. The moment worked because it was not trying to work, was not directed at producing any particular effect, was simply you, in your genuine, unperformed, present in your own experience state. The moment you try to recreate it, it is no longer that. It is the managed version, the version that knows it is being seen, the version that is, however subtly, aimed. And the avoidance system, which is calibrated to detect the difference between the genuine and the performed, will feel the difference. The genuine moment cannot be manufactured on demand. It can only arise when you are genuinely present in your own experience, not thinking about the avoidance response, not trying to produce an effect, not even aware of being witnessed, which means the most honest thing available to you is not to try harder to recreate the moment. It is to simply be yourself, fully, without monitoring, without calibration, without the awareness of being observed that turns genuine presence into performance, not for their sake, for yours, because the genuine, unmonitored, fully inhabited version of yourself is worth being regardless of what it produces in anyone else. What this reveals about your natural state, here is what the moment and the specific effect it produced reveals about you. Your natural state, when unobserved and uncalibrated, is extraordinary. Not extraordinary in the hyperbolic sense. In the specific, psychological, actually uncommon sense of someone whose genuine presence has a quality that breaks through defenses that was specifically built to prevent breaking through. That quality is not something you do. It is something you are. It arises when the performance stops, when the monitoring drops, when the self-consciousness recedes, when you are simply occupied with your own genuine experience. And the specific truth this reveals is that the performance, the managed, calibrated self-conscious version of yourself that is present in many social and relational contexts is actually the lesser version. The version that is more work and less effective and less genuinely you. The natural state is better, is more, is the version that produces involuntary, cannot be managed away effects in people whose defenses are specifically designed to prevent being affected. This is worth knowing, not as information about the avoidant, as information about yourself, about the relationship between your genuine presence and your managed presence, about which one is worth cultivating, about what your life would feel like if the natural state, the unmonitored, fully inhabited, genuinely yourself state, became the consistent one rather than the occasional one. The moment that touched their heart did not belong to your performed version. It belonged to the real one. Go be the real one, not for them, for the quality of your own daily life, for the specific, irreplaceable experience of being genuinely present in your own existence, rather than managing your presence for others' consumption. The larger truth, this particular dynamic teaches across every script in this conversation, every psychological portrait, every layer of insight into the avoidance interior. There has been a consistent pattern worth naming as the conversation approaches its end. The things that reach the avoidant are always the things that are not trying to reach them. The selfhood that disarms is the selfhood that is not performing selfhood. The presence that stays with them is the presence that was not aware of being witnessed. The love that refuses to be managed is the love that was not calculating its own effect. The moment that touched their heart was the moment that was not trying to touch anything. This pattern is not an instruction manual for reaching avoidance. It is something more fundamental than that. It is a description of what genuine presence looks like. And the fact that genuine presence is precisely what reaches people whose defenses are built against performed presence is not a coincidence or a strategic insight. It is simply the truth of how human beings actually connect. Beneath the strategies and the frameworks and the psychological understanding, beneath all of it, genuine connection has always been produced by genuine presence. Not presence aimed at connection, presence that is simply fully, genuinely itself. The avoidant fell because of an unintentional moment of your genuine presence. They cannot stop thinking about it because genuine things once encountered do not diminish the way performed things do. And you, the genuine, particular, natural state you, are capable of producing that quality of presence not just in one unguarded moment, but consistently, daily, in every available context, not as a technique for reaching avoidance, as the basic, irreplaceable, entirely available to you right now way of being in your own life. That is the teaching, not how to touch the avoidance heart, how to inhabit your own, fully, without performance, without monitoring, without the managed, calibrated version that is less than what you actually are. Simply you, the real one. That has always been the point. That has always been enough. The moment has been described. What hasn't been examined is what you actually do with it. Not strategically, not in the sense of how to produce more moments like the one that touched them, or how to position yourself so that the thinking they cannot stop becomes action they cannot delay. That kind of doing is really just more of the same orientation, organized around their interior, calibrated to their response, aimed at producing a particular effect in someone else's experience. The doing that matters here is different, quieter, more internal, more genuinely yours, the work of becoming consistently what you were in that moment. The moment that touched them was unintentional, unmonitored, the natural expression of someone who had, for whatever reason, distraction, ease, genuine absorption in something else, stopped performing and started simply being. The question worth sitting with is why that state is not your consistent one, not as self-criticism, as genuine inquiry. Because if the unmonitored, unperformed, genuinely present version of yourself is the one that produces this quality of effect, that reaches people past defenses specifically built to prevent being reached. Then the question of why it is occasional rather than consistent is actually the most important question available to you. What produces the monitoring? What installs the performance? What is it specifically that causes the natural state to recede and the managed version to take its place? For most people who find themselves in the avoidant dynamic, the answer has a common shape. The monitoring was learned, not in a single dramatic moment, but through the accumulated experience of environments where the unmonitored version produced unpredictable responses, where genuine expression sometimes landed well and sometimes produced withdrawal or dismissal or the specific kind of emotional unavailability that teaches. Pay attention, read the room, calibrate before expressing. Check whether this version of yourself is going to be received before committing to it. That learning was not irrational. In the environments where it developed, it was adaptive. It was the intelligent response of someone who was paying attention to what worked and what didn't, who learned, through real experience, that the unmonitored version was not always safe. But environments change. People grow. The situation that made the monitoring necessary is not necessarily the situation you are currently in. And the monitoring that was adaptive in the original context becomes, in new contexts, the thing that prevents the genuine presence that makes real connection possible. The work of becoming consistently what you were in that moment is the work of recognizing where the monitoring is still serving a real purpose and where it has become habit, where the performance is protecting something that genuinely needs protecting, and where it is simply running because it has always run. Where the calibration is the intelligent response to an actually unpredictable environment, and where it is the old program operating in a new context that does not require it. That recognition is not made once. It is made repeatedly, in specific moments, when the monitoring engages, when the performance installs, when the natural state begins to recede. The practice is noticing, not judging, noticing, and then asking honestly whether this situation actually requires the management or whether the management is a reflex from somewhere earlier. Over time, with enough honest noticing, The reflex loses some of its automaticity. The managed version appears less reflexively. The natural state becomes more consistently available, not because you decided to be more genuine, but because you stopped, in specific moments, reaching for the management when the situation did not require it.